Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today we're diving into something absolutely wild about the architecture of our own minds. Have you ever stopped to wonder why human beings, literally across every culture, every era, seem to be practically hardwired to believe in some kind of higher power? Well, we are going to explore a really compelling paradox today. Our brains possess this infinite, amazing capacity to conceptualize the eternal. But as you'll see, this ability was actually built by accident. It grew out of a biological framework driven entirely by basic life-or-death survival. So let me ask you this. Why on earth are our brains so perfectly wired to see ghosts in a dark room or gods up in the sky? It's a massive universal mystery, right? Well, to figure this out, we actually need to take a little trip back in time. I want you to pull yourself straight into the mindset of our ancient ancestors, out there surviving on a highly dangerous, totally unpredictable savanna. Back then, every rustling leaf, every suddenly snapped twig could quite literally mean the difference between life and death. Which brings us right into Section 1, the survival instinct, or the biology of belief. Let's break down the evolutionary math here. Picture this. You're an early human, and you hear a bush rustling nearby. If you mistake the wind for a hidden predator, the cost is just a quick surge of adrenaline. Sure, you run away, maybe you look a little foolish to your friends, but you live. But let's look at the alternative. What if you assume it's just the wind, but it's actually a predator? The cost there is death. So evolution heavily favors paranoia. Our ancestors survived precisely because they assumed a hidden agent was always lurking behind any ambiguous event. And that brings us to the absolute star of today's show, a concept called HAD, or the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device. I really want to emphasize this because HAD is the core, foundational biological engine that drives human belief. Basically, it's a neurological hazard precaution system. Because it was physically safer to over-attribute intent to random events, our brains just naturally started populating the world with unseen actors. Things like lightning, seasonal droughts, or that snapping twig we mentioned. They weren't processed as random ecology. They were perceived as the intentional acts of unseen spirits.
All right, let's keep that in mind as we move into Section 2, building the God concept through evolutionary architecture.
So ADD is our foundation, right? It's great at detecting unseen agents. But humans are complex, so we naturally started stacking other cognitive abilities on top of it. Next up was theory of mind. Once we developed the ability to understand the thoughts and intentions of other people in our tribe, we just projected that directly onto those unseen agents HAD was creating, giving them conscious, watchful minds. Then, mix in terror management theory. As humans became fully self-aware, we realized we were inevitably going to die, which, as you can imagine, caused paralyzing existential terror. So we combined all these steps. We used the HAD-generated spirits to create a supreme eternal agent that could buffer this death anxiety and promise some sort of cosmic order. Now, you might be thinking this was just a nice philosophical comfort, but actually, it provided measurable physical neurological relief. These belief systems effectively downregulate the anterior cingulate cortex, or the ACC. That is literally the brain's distress signal. By trusting in a higher power, which, remember, was constructed initially by our trusty HAD response, early humans essentially hacked their own neurobiology. It prevented sheer existential panic from completely destroying their ability to function. It's honestly mind-blowing when you lay it out, because pretty much every profound religious concept has a direct evolutionary counterpart. HAD smoothly translates into unseen spirits. Theory of mind becomes omniscient, all-knowing gods. Terror management translates to a reassuring cosmic order. Even our basic infant attachment system, that hardwired drive to seek out a caregiver for safety, translates seamlessly into viewing God as the ultimate secure base when human bonds inevitably fail us. It gave humanity a much-needed psychological safe haven. But, of course, there's a catch. Let's look at Section 3, the tribal trap, covering institutions and divisions. You know, brilliant psychologists like Gordon Allport and philosophers like Henri Bergson, they warned us about this side of things. They called it extrinsic or closed religion. This is what happens when religion is used primarily as a utilitarian tool for social status or psychological comfort. It enforces really rigid group cohesion. And the big problem here? Because it's operating on that ancient evolutionary survival hardware, it is highly correlated with out-group prejudice. It essentially expands the selfish ego to encompass the whole tribe, weaponizing our HHD-driven paranoia against anybody who looks or thinks differently. And honestly, this biological trap goes way beyond just religion. The psychoanalyst Erich Fromm actually identified two different ways of existing. The first is the mode of having, which is driven heavily by our brain's dopamine system. Now, dopamine is a chemical of anticipation, not actual pleasure. So it traps us on this hedonic treadmill of endless greed and pursuit, leaving us feeling completely alienated. The alternative is the mode of being, which focuses on authentic present experience and real joy. The takeaway here is that both dogmatic tribalism and endless greed keep us trapped in that first mode, permanently stuck in a biological state of lack. We even see this biological limitation popping up in how we care for others. Take neuroscientist Tanya Singer's research, for example. She found a massive, crucial distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy literally shares another person's emotional pain, but it's biologically limited by severe in-group bias, and it often leads to rapid burnout. Compassion, on the other hand, is a game changer. It activates completely different neural reward networks. It's an active, warm motivation to help. And most importantly, through neuroplasticity, it can be trained to completely transcend tribal lines. Okay, let's pivot to some truly good news in Section 4, Rewiring for Transcendence. Welcome to the fascinating world of neurotheology. This is where the science gets completely awe-inspiring. When researchers look at brain scans of individuals deep in prayer or intense meditation, they see a real-time phenomenon called parietal diaphragmation. Big academic word, I know, but it simply means there's a physical blocking of sensory input to the brain's orientation area. To put that in everyday terms, the brain literally stops calculating the physical boundaries of the self. That panicked, survival-oriented ego we've been talking about, it just drops away entirely. And the subjective experience of this neurological event is something called absolute unitary being, or AUB. Basically, when the brain drops that ego boundary, the person feels physically and spiritually woven into the infinite fabric of the cosmos. It's a profound feeling of oneness. What's amazing here is that this proves transcendence isn't just some coping mechanism, and it's not just a lingering byproduct of our HAD to hardware. It is a measurable, alternative state of consciousness that we can actually choose to enter. So how do we actually pull this off in real life? Well, the philosopher Simone Weil had this brilliant concept she called decreation. She noted that absolutely unmixed attention is prayer. Decreation is the undoing of the creature within us to return the self to the divine. What she means is that by radically focusing our attention outward, truly, deeply looking at others without our algorithmic distractions or selfish prejudices, we literally starve the ego of its fuel. We actively undo that paranoid biological creature within us to connect with a much larger universal truth. I love this because it aligns so perfectly with Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore's concept of spiritual humanism. Tagore argued that humans possess this incredible surplus of emotional and creative energy that goes way, way beyond what we need for basic biological survival. When we finally step off that paranoid treadmill of our HAD hardware, this surplus energy finds its absolute highest expression in active love, in creating art, and in selfless service to the living, breathing human beings right around us. Even Albert Einstein hit the nail on the head here. He beautifully bridged the gap between our fear-based evolutionary biology and this ultimate truth, calling it cosmic religious feeling. He viewed this as the highest possible stage of human evolution. It's a state that is totally free of rigid dogmas or human-like gods born from our ancient hazard detection systems. For Einstein, it was simply an awe-inspiring recognition of the sublime rationality and total interconnectedness of the universe. So that leaves us with one final, pretty profound question for you to chew on today. Are you still operating on ancient survival hardware, constantly driven by dopamine, tribalism, and the ghosts of our hyperactive agency detection? Or are you ready to rewrite those neural pathways, drop the ego, and step fully into the mode of being? The capacity for profound, universal compassion is literally sitting right there inside your brain right now. It's completely up to you how you use it. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.